Hi guys, Giuseppe Gaiazzo here from silenceandsound.com, and today I'm here to introduce you our new cinematic horror library called Freaktion. Freaktion is a collection of sounds from tortured metallic objects. We have experimented a lot with friction mallets, superballs, bows, multiple stiff and sharp objects and a large variety of metals, from big aluminium surfaces to tension coils, elastic springs, and even custom-built instruments. Then we have manipulated all of these sounds to create unsettling cinematic noises, squeaks, squeals, and mashups. Freaktion is for sound designer and composer of modern horror cinematic music that are looking for new and fresh sounds. If you want to add a unique and freaky character to your production, Freaktion will offer you a large choice of long pitch bands, risers, transition effects, ear-piercing screeches, and even tonal elements and vocal effects. Freaktion features 330 more sounds plus 11 Kontakt instruments to further manipulate the samples, and it includes also 130 more source recordings to create your own sound effects. Like with our previous library, we are currently running a special deal of 50% for the next 30 days, during which you will be able to purchase Freaktion for $24 instead of $49. So let's have a listen now to the sounds that are featured in the library. So, all the sounds that I've played from this preset largely come originally from recordings of various objects that have been played with a friction mallet. So we wanted to explore the sonic possibility of this unconventional approach to come up with sounds that were both particularly suitable for the cinematic composition realm as unique and particular at the same time. And the greatest challenge that we had when recording these sounds was actually, first of all, the fact that they are originally really quiet. And so we had to experiment a bit with microphones and with their positioning in order to get the sound right. But also, these sounds are particularly prominent in the high part of the spectrum. So we had, during the design stage, to experiment and work a lot in order to give a consistency all along the spectrum and come up with something that could have an impact and a presence that particularly works in the case of cinematic music, as I said. But we have not just experimented with friction mallet, we've also used bows, for example, violin bows, cello bows, and other stiff objects to scratch metallic surfaces and experiment if we could come up with something interesting. So before actually going into detail of the interface, I would like to play for you other of these sounds that come also from other sources. For example, this preset here is called the cinematic scratches and bows, and sounds like this. So also these sounds have this sort of unsettling, creepy character, but as you can hear, they are a little bit more screechy, let's say, in comparison to the previous one. But this is just to give you an idea of the variety of samples that you can find in Freaktion and the way you can use them and combine them together. So now I think that we can have a closer look at what we have here in the Kontakt instrument interface and see what kind of controls we have to further manipulate the sounds starting from the original ones. Now, if you are familiar with some of our previous library, you know that all our Kontakt instruments are organized in this way. 3 groups of samples, which are with independent control for all the parameters, and which are highlighted with different colors, both on the virtual keyboard as in the overall interface and the waveform as well. Probably you noticed that as I play the samples, they show in a different color in the waveform, and that's because they belong to one of the 3 different groups that are highlighted with 3 different colors. So, for example, in the case of these samples that is highlighted in gray, this belongs to the first group or layer of samples. As you can see, they are highlighted in gray also here on the virtual keyboard. And also all the control corresponding to this group are highlighted in the same color. For example, these knobs here and all these elements in the central part of the interface. So that means that this control only affects these gray samples and not the other ones. If you want, for example, apply the controls that we see on these samples that belongs to the second group, the red one, then we have to use this button, move on the screen corresponding to this layer, and you can see you have a visual clue of what you're actually doing and which control affect the current sample. So you can see everything becomes red, so that means that this control only affects the red samples. And same thing is also for the violets. So 3 different groups of samples with independent control, and this is in order to give you the flexibility to combine each other, maybe stacking them together on the top of each other and come up with something different and more customized, let's say. Now let's get back to the first group, and let's see which control we find starting from the upper part of the panel, this one with dark background. Here on the 2 sides we have pitch and volume, and each one of these knobs corresponds to one of the groups. Here you do not have to browse by using these buttons. You always have the control of pitch and volume for the 3 groups always here in the panel. So this knob will affect the pitch of the gray samples, this one only of the red ones, and so on. And same thing also for the volume. I see here, right below the waveform, we find a volume envelope control, which attack, hold, decay, sustain, and release, which is again independent for each group. So if you want to, for example, in the case of the first layer, here we have the corresponding control. If you want to change the volume envelope for the second one, then we have to use the browsing buttons. So pretty straightforward. If we move in the central part of the panel, we'll find on the left side a low pass filter and a high pass filter, and to each one of them there is an for each one of them there is an LFO for which we have control of the rate and the amount. So the reason why I've decided to place 2 different LFOs for each filter is to give you more flexibility when creating stuttering effects or maybe rhythmic effects, and combine the different maybe different time signatures for each one of the LFOs and come up with something more interesting and intricate. Just to make an example, if I select groups from the second layer that are longer, they are particularly good, to experiment a little bit more with the LFOs. So if I increase the rate to 16, clearly also the amount, we can have something like this. But here, if you want to appreciate how the combination of the 2 LFOs can work together, maybe we can set the rate and the of the 2 LFOs on different time signatures, maybe 32 for the LFO, the HPF, and 80 for the for the LFO of the low pass filter. And so you can hear that the combination of the two LFOs can create something new, something interesting, starting from the original sound. Yeah, you can also play by changing the time signature of the LFO to create stuttering effects that increase in rate during the sound to create a feeling of urgency and weight, I might say, that works particularly well in the realm of cinematic composition. If we move on the right side of the panel, we have these two big knobs here, which respectively control a drive, so distortion effect, and the corresponding damping. And also right below we have these small knobs that correspond to an envelope control that affects this knob here, the drive. So we have attack, decay, sustain, and release, and this knob here that sets the amount of the envelope that you want to send to the drive. This can be useful, for example, if you want to play with let's say with how the drive kicks in during the sample. For example, if you want for a riser kind of sound, the distortion only to kicks in towards the end of the sample, then we can play with the attack of the envelope and having something like this. Maybe if I put it around 8 seconds. So you see that the distortion effect only starts to increase in intensity towards the ends of the sample, which is another trick that works good when working the cinematic realm. Also, don't forget that if you want to restore the default value for each of the knobs in the interface, you just need to hit Ctrl-click. So once again, let's give another try by playing with the envelope on another sound. And you have this slow fade out that is distorted, whereas the start of the sample is clean, let's say. You can play, you can experiment a lot to come up with something more original and customized in comparison to the initial samples. If we move to the final part of the panel, we have a master effects section, so reverb and delay. For the reverb, we have control on sides, color, stereo, and damping, plus this slider that controls the amount of the effect. And for the delay, we have control on the rate and feedback, and again, this slider controls the amount of the effect. Now, both for the delay as for the LFO, the range is from 64 to 8 for the delay, and actually the opposite for the LFO, so from 8 to 64. There is another some other presets that I would like to show you, and the first one is actually this one that is called Tonal, that is slightly different from the ones that I played you so far, because first of all, you can see that the virtual keyboard is organized in a different way. You do not have that the groups are scattered along the virtual keyboard, but you have the initial keys, all of them belong to the first group, then this central part of keys all belong to the second one, and finally the third part of keys that only belongs to the third group of layer of sample. This because for each one of these groups we have used one of the samples as a root key, and we have distributed along the keyboard in order to create a playable instrument. This is because some of the sounds that we have recorded have a tonal element, which was particularly good to create a playable instrument like this, for example. So as you can hear, and as you can see from the waveform, we have set the micro loop along the sample during the part during which there was the most of the tonal content, And there is a back and forth loop that creates this long sustained tone, which has a root note and at the same time this sort of organic character that can be quite good to create, for example, evolving pads or atmospheres, or why not even melodies. Yeah, for example, for this one, you might play with the distortion to create some Bram effect. Maybe also adding a little bit more reverb. So you see that these kind of sounds are very versatile, because you can both have a very unsettling tonal effect and also other one that might be used to even to play a melody. Actually, you have two different presets of tonal sounds that are organized the same way. This one is pretty creepy. Okay. Some other presets that I would like to show you are actually, yeah, this one that is entirely based on reverse elements that can be used both for a transition effect or for risers. Yeah, this one worked particularly well if you want to try the what I was saying before, to experiment with the LFOs for the low, both for the low pass filter as for the high pass filter. And there is a specific preset that is entirely based on this, that is called stuttering distortion, when you have something like this. So you can overlap these two different time signatures from the two LFOs to create something more intricate. So as you can hear, there is a large variety of samples and sounds that you can obtain from Freaktion, from rising effect to distortion, tonal elements, etc. But another preset on which I would like to highlight is actually this one. Well, these two that are entirely created from source sounds. So source sounds are the sounds that have been recorded as they are, where only some very transparent treatment has been applied, from very light EQ and denoising, and in some cases the add of some sweeteners in order to let's say fill other part of the spectrum that were lacking from the original sounds and create more something more consistent. So you have this kind of sounds. Okay, I'll play some also from the second one. And in these two, with these two presets, you can take advantage of the possibility to stack sounds from different groups on the top of each other and independently manipulating them in order to create your own sound. But you can also, and this is something that I would like to highlight, you do not need necessarily to be a Kontakt user to use all the sounds in Freaktion. You can also just drag and drop them from the samples folder on the timeline of your DAW, or upload them in another sampler and customize the way you manipulate them, and maybe applying some kind of modifiers and processing that is not part of the original interface. So guys, I think that's all. I've tried to concentrate in a few times all the possible sounds that you can have from Freaktion and give you an idea of the possibility that you have with this library. Once again, we are running an introductory price that will allow you to purchase Freaktion at half of the price for the next 30 days. And that's all. So I hope that you have enjoyed this video demo, that you enjoyed the sounds, and see you next time. Bye.